Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We've got a late-night recording here with sort of kind of my former boss, but more importantly, he's a grandmaster of chess. He is a former U.S. Open champion. He's been a top 100 player in the world. He's also a lawyer. He's writing a lot about chess. He writes for U.S. Chess Online, American Chess Magazine. In the past, he did the Game of the Month the Game of the Month column for U.S. CF's Chess Life magazine, and of course he is a chess teacher. So GM Michael Rohde, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Ben.
Oh, my pleasure. And I know that you were just saying before we recorded how you didn't have like brand new material to hawk or things to discuss, but as I was telling you, you're like an American chess legend. You've been playing actively for all these years. You've seen every player come and go and rise to the top, and been in the center of it all in New York. So I don't think you need anything new, and I'm excited to hear your perspective. I was just looking at your player card on USCF, on your rating card, and you've played 4 tournaments in October alone. So for that alone, I feel like you're one of, in addition to being, of course, super strong with varied experience, you're one of the busiest players we've had. So how's your chess going, Mike?
Well, actually, it's been a rough year. But let me just backtrack a second, because when you called me a former boss,
yeah,
that's the funny thing about all that is that most people, or nearly everybody, who is let's say a former teacher who worked in the schools in New York with Sophia and me. Well, we might say maybe Sophia was your boss, maybe not me, but most of our former, or let's say, probably all of our former teachers all went on to really great success one way or the other in various different things. So we had a great crew of people. A lot of different people. And you came in for a little while, and I'm glad to see what you're doing. But the point is that every time I think about people who maybe I might have written a letter of recommendation for or went on to something else, they all went on to tremendous things. So that's just something that just struck me when you said that. But let's get back to how I'm playing, which is, let's just say, not very well. I want to backtrack to the summer, where I deliberately played in a lot of tournaments, kind of went to a lot of different places. I had some, success. I went to the National Seniors. It was the first time I went to a seniors tournament. I started noticing, irrespective of all that people, when I do well, they're sort of, when they send me compliments, it's always a mixed compliment, because they're always referring to my age somehow, and I'm not even thinking about that most of the time. And that I even stayed out of the senior tournaments for a few years when I was eligible, so as not to categorize myself in that way. But this was just too nice a tournament, the National Senior Tournament that I went to in the summer that was at the U.S. Open. So I went to a bunch of tournaments, and in October, I try to write articles when I go to tournaments. So I went to the Chess Sanity Invitational. Chess Sanity is sort of a new organization out on Long Island. They have in this case it was very small, 6-player invitational. I actually wrote a little article about it that appeared on Chess Life Online. So I did okay. So some of I like to find good spots like that. And then I play at the Marshall a lot, But again, when you mentioned the active, that title belongs to Jay Bonin, so I can't compete with that.
Well, yeah, no one can compete with Jay in that regard.
Yeah, no one can compete with him, and even week by week, it's impossible to compete with him. So I'm not even really. So if there's a second place in the activity thing, recently, I don't know who gets it.
Okay, so for listeners from out of the country who may not have heard of Jay Bonin, I'm guessing everyone in the U.S. has, but he's a New York legend, international master, plays more than anyone. I think something like 1,000 rated games a year. Does that sound plausible? I think I remember reading that somewhere, and he wrote a book called Active Pieces that you guys should check out. So, but yeah, I mean, no one can compare themselves to Jay in terms of activity and staying sharp and able to win any tournament, but still, I mean, we have a lot of people who aspire to play a lot, but not all of us can pull it off or do pull it off.
Yeah, when you said I played 4 tournaments in October, okay, I'm sure that's accurate, but I'm actually playing, in the fall, I play a little bit less because teaching revs back up, and the summer tends to have, the bigger open tournaments, sort of destination places and stuff. So in the fall or actually winter, spring, I do play a lot. I play a lot of smaller tournaments, but there's a different feel to it. The summer is when you feel like all the chess professionals are out there traveling, and it's pretty exciting to see who's going to do well and all these different things.
So I have a couple follow-ups on that, Mike. Number one, I read about some people that you've mentioned, but is there anyone that leaps to mind in terms of people who've caught your eye, players that seem to be making a push or that you feel are underrated, or like young talents that you're seeing repeatedly on this coming off the summer circuit? Right.
So first of all, there's more young talents, now than ever before. So it's very hard to. There's so many, stars out there, legitimate ones, that it's almost crazy in that sense. Now, if we talk about people that are, let's say, peers of mine, then it's a question of who is concentrating on chess and who is deciding to do something slightly different and perhaps not concentrating on their tournament performance. And then I have to also come to terms with the fact that some of these players, have always been better than me. So it's not a question of whether, they're studying now and I'm doing something else or anything like that. So, but one gets the sense that, some players are really, pushing forward and some players aren't. And I guess without really thinking too specifically about this, I think that most players of my generation are not really playing a lot of tournaments.
So who would you consider of your generation? Like, who comes to mind first?
Well, there's so many classic players. I mean, Fedorovich doesn't seem to play in a lot of tournaments at all. I know he went to Canada because he enjoys going, to the Opens up there, in July. I knew he was going to go there. I was actually maybe planning to go with him, but I didn't make it. It conflicted with a couple other things. Other than that, I don't know how much he plays. It's always stunned me when he had opportunities down in Greenwich Village and he wasn't going to the Marshall so much, and I was going there practically all the time sometimes. But I mean, I know he's very busy with teaching also. I just think about him because I've known him for so long. We're both from Jersey, and then there's Joel. Joel's doing a tremendous amount of stuff with. He got his new book out there, I know, and he's got the videos.
Joel Benjamin.
Yeah, so he doesn't seem to play a lot, but I know he went to the reason I think about this is because I know he went to the World Senior. I went to the National Senior at the U.S. Open, but he went to the World Senior along with 4 other selected players in Germany in the summer, and of course they brought home the gold medal, and Joel got an individual gold there. So that was quite good, even though I don't think he's playing that many other tournaments. So I could think of lots of other players of that generation that I also don't think are playing that much in terms of American grandmasters. So often when I go to tournaments, I actually play a lot of young people in tournaments. It used to be the case I would go, let's say, to the Marshall Chess Club in New York City and actually end up sometimes playing against people who were my own students. Mm-hmm. And there was a significant, experience and rating disparity there, and it would be quite shocking if in those days, a few years ago, whenever that was, or let's say for many years, I would always win practically. But now one has to get used to losing to young players occasionally, and now I'm not even talking about my own students. I'm just talking about kids who have just gotten to be so incredibly good that it's no big deal. If their rating is that high and, if you lose them, it's not like losing to a kid. It's just like losing to a senior master or an IM or whatever they are. And, it's just normal at this point. So I remember seeing an article that Robert Hess wrote in Chess Life a couple of months ago. It was a very, very complimentary article about Brandon Jacobson. I actually saw the game. It was at the New York International in June. And Brandon, well, it was a tough game, but Brandon eventually won a convincing game. And Robert, in the article, was extremely gracious as to Brandon's strength. I mean, everyone knows Brandon's really incredibly strong. I played Brandon in the World Open. He actually played I was white. He played a Queen's Indian that I had recently, same line that I had recently convincingly beat him in a blitz tournament. But he just played this exact same line against me in one of the later rounds in the World Open. And I, overconfidently went into the same variation. He had a lot of activity. He was pressing me the whole way. Eventually around move 39 or 40, I think at the time control, I could have played something that would have convincingly given me no problem, but I missed it. And then he played the end game. He beat me in the end game. Once that happened, it's.
So can I stop you there for a second, Mike?
Yeah, sure.
So take us through the psychology of that. I know that you're a little disappointed that your rating isn't quite at its peak, but obviously, like for our listeners, you're an extremely strong player and you play another one and you've had an opening recently. So when he starts to go into the same opening, how do you how do you parse the psychology of how likely is it that he has something, cooked up versus him just being willing to go into it? Like right. How do you decide if you're just going to go down the exact same road? Exactly.
Well, first of all, when we know we're playing a very talented, strong player, then everything has to be dissected in terms of where are we with this guy? We know he's good. We have respect for him. I just want to preface that whole thing by saying that, because I've played relatively a lot of games, I sometimes just to take off for a second here, I played sometimes in a Nassau Chess Club Championship on Long Island. So I go out there once a year. So I played out there. Somebody played some kind of I used to be an expert in a thing called the Lisitsin Gambit. Even John Donaldson said, don't play this against Rohde. He knows this stuff. So basically the Lisitsin Gambit, most people don't know what it is. It's white plays knight f3, black plays the Dutch f5, and white just plays e4. So I just made a habit of playing that because I think Donaldson complimented me on it. I just started playing it. So I go out there, I play it against somebody. Somebody knows a lot of theory about it. I get into a position where white really has to sacrifice a piece. I sack the piece against him, and it was kind of unclear. Maybe I didn't like my position for a while, but I eventually win. Okay, I don't really go out to Nassau for a whole year. Go back out there. End up playing the same guy. I don't really remember. I don't even remember that I played the Lisitsin against him the year before. I just played the exact same thing against this guy again. And basically around move 10 or 11 or something, he plays an improved version of this thing where I still have to sacrifice the piece. And now I realize I just am completely not showing enough respect to my opponents. I can't remember this guy, and I'm in the exact same position, only it's worse. I think I still won.
What's he rated approximately?
2,200. I think 2,200.
Okay.
2,200 strength. Maybe he was a little bit, rated lower than that, but effectively 2,200 type strength. And so that kind of thing happens once in a while. I run into these guys with their pet variations. On the other hand, sometimes I deliberately head right into someone's variation just for fun or because I don't think it's very good. And sometimes they will repeat a bad variation against me, then it's just kind of comical in reverse where I really do have control of the situation. But I realize that sometimes people might remember their game against me more than I remember them, so I have to be a little more careful with these openings. So let's catch us up to what happened with Brandon. So first of all, about the Blitz tournaments. The Marshall has Blitz tournaments really twice a month, but once a month is their FIDE Blitz, which kind of is just somehow more, just a bigger thing or more guaranteed prizes or something. I never really do that well in the Blitz tournaments. There are just too many players like Lenderman or DeLugi or people like that who are just going to, they're stronger than me at Blitz. Not to mention whatever with regular chess. Obviously, Lenderman's one of the top 100 in the world, or virtually so, with his rating. But the Blitz tournaments, of course, are fun. And I often get good positions, even against the very best players. So I think in this tournament I had knocked off a couple of really, really good players. I was doing fairly well. Not really necessarily winning, but in the running for something or other. And I ended up playing Brandon, and he played the Queen's Indian, kind of one of these provocative defenses where he lets White sort of get the D5 push against the Queen's Indian. So it's risky for Black, let's say. And I played a really nice game against him and got all the activity that White's supposed to get there, and I won that game. Okay, so then at the World Open, it's probably like round 7 or 8 in the World Open. Well, no, maybe this is at the U.S. Masters, actually, now that I'm talking about it. Yeah, this game I'm now talking about is at the U.S. Masters in August this year. So, same opening, and somehow I overlooked a couple of things, it seems like, and he just got a lot of activity. If you can imagine Black light squared bishop on b7, the Queen's Indian bishop getting snuffed out by my pawn on d5. But then he plays knight a6, knight c5, and the bishop on b7 gets to a6. And now suddenly he's crawling all over me with the minor pieces. And also there were no minor pieces exchanged, so we each had 4 minor pieces. So a lot of minor pieces just flying around. And it was a very, sort of dicey position for me. I managed to play pretty well, and the end result of all of this is that all he could get out of it was he actually managed to grab a pawn at some point. But then he didn't. But then his initiative was gone, and I was okay, and I had some play against his king position, enough to get to, let's just call it theoretical equality, where he couldn't do anything because he was still a pawn up, but my pieces were active. But I just didn't play it quite right, and then he extricated himself, and in the end game I just got totally smashed. So, I don't know, there was no psychology about the later part of the game, but the opening, I was not very careful.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but I remember in that tournament in the U.S. Masters, I remember sort of discussing, Joel Benjamin was there. We discussed at some point in the tournament that I was just taking risks. I played a lot of good players in that tournament. I played up to some of the highest rated players in the tournament. I played Jeffrey Zhang in round very early in the tournament for some reason. I think he had 1-1 because he lost in round 2, and I had 1-1. I had drawn 2. I was paired up against 2 really good guys, drew both of them, and Jeffrey had lost his second round game. So I played him in round 3. Okay, he beat me eventually. But I played like all good players, and I was starting to take risks. I was making, pawn sacrifices in the Catalan as White, even though I didn't really know it that well. I was just kind of throwing a lot of pieces around and just saying to myself, this is going to be, I wasn't really in the running for anything, but I was playing like that. And so by the time I got to play Brandon, I had kind of forgotten to slow down a little bit and think about this. So that's what happened there.
And what about if you play, so you mentioned Jay Bonin earlier. I mean, you've probably played him like 100 times. So I don't know, Jay knows, but I bet he does.
Concluded is about 400 times. Probably.
Wow, that's unreal. So how's the psychology when you're sitting down for the 400th time? Like, how do you decide what opening to play?
Right.
Stuff like that.
Well,
are you looking for something new, or are you trying to probe him somewhere? Or are you just always the same lines?
There was a point in time where I had a very nice streak running against Jay. And of course it's not like that anymore. He is, a very confident, capable player against anybody. So he never backs down from anything. He's a very good positional player, and he is very willing to sacrifice material for some kind of positional activity or something rather. A lot of my games against him tend to be at relatively fast time controls because we both play in one-day tournaments. It could be 4 or 5 or 6 rounds in a day or something. If it's like, for example, Columbus Day and holiday like that, the Marshall, they'll have a 6-rounder. So, there's a lot of fast time control games. Now, about the openings, we have played just about everything against each other. But, of course, I do know, what his main preferences are. And, it's just whatever it is. He actually sort of plays somewhat quietly in the openings, like Magnus, I guess. He's trying to not be overly theoretical in the openings and just get a position and then just see what happens. So I think that Carlsen sort of has that style or has adopted that, practice of doing that kind of thing. And I think Jay is, especially in recent years, definitely doing that. Of course, they still lead to certain positions that I've had against him many times, but so I'm not really too much worried about the openings against him.
Gotcha. And now that you're writing about all these tournaments frequently when you're playing, you mentioned you're also covering the tournament for US Chess Online. So are you able to put that on the side when you're competing, or do you find yourself looking at the top board while you're playing and like thinking about the storyline and stuff like that?
Well, a long time ago when I was writing Game of the Month for Chess Life, and when I was kind of higher up in the rankings in these tournaments, the main way in which that would affect me sometimes is sometimes I would literally be thinking during my own games as to what I or someone else would say about the move, which is a very distracting thing to think about. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to say, well, if I do this, what kind of, who's going to say what about that? Sometimes you can picture it, but it's not helpful, because you can really delude yourself as to what's going on. Now, chess commenting, which of course I've done. Well, I haven't. I was a commentator at some of the big events like the World Championship, along with many other players. But so I'm not really talking about that. But chess writing, a lot of it is, we have to say, well, this move is whatever it is, but some other move might have been better here. We're constantly finding ways to try to say that in as nice a way as possible.
Right. As a teacher, you have to do that too.
Yeah. So I tell kids, we're I don't want to interrupt myself too many times here, but we have to recognize that chess is a game where you really get the most out of it when you're constantly picking at things and saying, well, there's an alternative here. What about that? And but anyway, so it's distracting to think about what a written comment could be during the course of things. But when I look at other people's games, I'm looking out of pure interest for the most part, not even thinking about what I might write about them because it's just plain interesting. I tend to be one of those players who likes to watch other games. And when I hear teachers, I have a lot of differences with many chess teachers. I hear teachers talking about, giving it the 110%, meaning, okay, sit at the board. They're talking to kids now, sit at the board 110%. Well, I don't even like that. For two things. One is I myself like to watch other people's games while I'm playing. It actually is just interesting. But number two, and probably more importantly, and this is useful advice that came from somebody else a long time ago, is that when it's not your move, it's better to actually relax the brain a little bit. So you can give it 110% if you want when it's your move, and then when it's your opponent's move, I heard people say things like, well, think about general ideas, not moves. Well, because you've already made your decision. Your opponent has maybe 4, 5, or 6 pretty good replies to it. You've already decided before your move that you're going to be okay against all of those different things that could happen. Now all those things could happen. But what's the point of killing yourself trying to figure out exactly what you do against all of them? Because you've already done that before your move. Now that it's your opponent's move, maybe it's time to let the brain relax a little bit, or even maybe get up from the board and look around. Of course, if you're talking to kids, they have to have some discipline when they do that. But I think it's okay to do that. I personally enjoy doing it.
Now, would you say that's equally true even like in action chess or more for classical?
Well, yeah, that action chess is a little bit rough for doing that because it's a little bit impractical to some degree. I still, peer over at, openings for one thing. We want to notice the openings that are going on, just get a general impression of everybody's openings because you never know who you're going to play, and you can suddenly recall that someone is doing a certain thing and think, oh, okay, that was interesting to note that even if you're going to be black against them next round, then white the previous round they did X, whatever, and that's a little bit of information. So I take information from all sources and just say, okay, it's useful somehow or interesting. Maybe not both. I don't know.
Okay. And is there anything else with your teaching? You mentioned that you do things differently. Are there other things that you find yourself doing differently as well?
Yeah, there are many things I do differently. All teachers have their own methods. And by the way, I always want to say that, every good player is fundamentally a good teacher because what it took for them to become a good player was to understand concepts. And surely they'll be able to explain them as well. Now, of course, there obviously are many other good teachers who might not be as high rated. But let's just be clear on the fact that all the good players are also good teachers. And a lot of them, of course, are teachers. So what do I do differently? I tend to have little sort of, with regular students, I have certain routines and certain fun routines. I mean, I think every teacher has like little nicknames for little things that could happen on the board. So teachers have a certain style and they have certain things that if a kid is dealing with multiple teachers because they have a teacher in school and they have a private teacher and then they go to a camp somewhere and hear somebody else, then okay, they'll be exposed to lots of different ways of describing things, or they may remember that the teachers are disagreeing with each other on certain exact positions. But I just have little routines. I'll just mention one that I know that Fedorovich really enjoyed this one. I have this little routine where I have this game that I played against somebody, and I refer to my opponent. And my most famous one is the man who forgot to castle. So I have this little routine where I show kids this game where my opponent didn't get castled, and there were all kinds of reasons why he didn't get castled, mostly because his bishop was attacked or his knight was attacked or whatever. But I just refer to him as the man who forgot to castle. And then that just became a little routine that my regular students, or if they showed up at some camp that I was at, whenever it comes around, they're all like, okay, here comes this thing, And then I sort of branched out from that to, the man who grabbed the B pawn or the man who did whatever thing it was, and just became a little routine that I did for a while until it sort of dropped off, and I thought of some other little fun little sort of, I don't know, gimmicky approach to things. So I have a lot of different things like that, but I don't think it's really that different from other teachers where they have their own little sort of routines that kids enjoy, or that I think the repetition factor is kind of a useful thing. It makes it kind of fun when kids can anticipate, what's going on and what's going to happen like that. So I think everybody has little, idiosyncrasies like that.
So, Mike, I'm a Scholastic teacher as well, and I also find myself with little sayings that I use all the time, and it definitely helps. I mean, the kids definitely enjoy it. But as someone who also teaches stronger players, I'm sure like talented young teenagers, do you find yourself using hooks like that for them as well?
Yes, but I think it's a different type of hook. Of course, if I'm teaching a strong teenager, which I certainly have some strong students like that, and all, typically those are very, very good students, of course. These are very, very smart kids, so we're not going to baby them at all. But in terms of a hook, or I guess I'm segueing into a slightly different thing, but what I try to emphasize is I want to see the student absorbing chess culture, not just the analysis of the moves. So the more that the student knows who the other players are or is familiar with other strong players, in who are local to him, or international players who he can read about or find out about, the better that is. Because chess is one of those things you have to immerse yourselves in. You can't just hope to outcompute the opposition or be better at it somehow than other people. So a better way is to go in some sort of a 360 degree immersion thing, which involves knowing who the players are, kind of knowing what players play what openings, just as, not because it's itself that important, but because it kind of grounds you as to what's going on, and then unless you choose your own openings based on that, and then you just get more involved in it. And so the hook is more something that refers to other people. A particular thing I like to do with very strong students is take a written article on chess and try to critique it, or try to understand what the annotator is saying, or try to understand why the annotator included certain things and had no idea what to say about something else. There's always questions in any written chess thing, as to why somebody left something out. They thought it was too obvious, or they don't understand what to say about it, or it's too complicated, or what. So many years ago, I would do this with Robert Burns' New York Times columns, and just really try to understand, because he had limited space. Why did he pick this thing to talk about? Now, of course, I just go to the magazines, and there are many, many good article writers, of course. So I do as much as I can to get a teenager to really feel like they're part of the chess community, and I think that's the best way to go about that.
So it sounds like you're drilling them on chess and writing at the same time.
Well, I make a big deal about writing, I guess. Part of the reason I make a big deal about writing is because I like the thinking process to be accurate. When I said before that I do things slightly different than other teachers, I'm going to give an example of this. So in this, I just thought of this now, but this is one of my, I always think about this. There's this amazing game, Adams Torre.
Oh, yeah, the back rank game.
The back rank game from 1923. So whatever people say all kinds of things about that game. But what a lot of people don't realize, in the middle of that combination, it's suddenly not about the back rank. It's about the fact that when Black tries to unhook his pieces from what White's doing, he finds that he can't do it, because if he runs away, then he doesn't have a counter threat. It's a very, very unusual position where White is threatening to make a desperado. In other words, White is threatening to not take Black's queen, but play queen takes rook, giving up his own queen, and then taking Black's queen for free. That's the actual threat. He's actually threatening to make a desperado, which is a very, very rare thing in chess, because desperados come up, when you're about to lose a piece, you take a pawn with you, and then you take the other guy's piece. They just come up out of nowhere. But this is a case where White, in the middle of that combination, is threatening to do this desperado, and Black is stuck. He can't get out of it, and that's a very, very unusual thing. So I stop the presses, basically, when I'm talking about that position. And I sometimes say, I don't really think you're going to find other teachers saying this, because it's just so bizarre. They have to really, not that they couldn't figure this out, but I'm obsessed with these kinds of, what is this concept really about? And that's just an example. So that's where I really, and, if I'm telling a class this, some kids will, I know their eyes will, gloss over or glass over or something and not understand or whatever. And then I'll announce that this is a pearl of wisdom, that they have to understand this one thing, and then I'll be satisfied. And so that will be what I'll talk about that. So that's slightly different, of course, from obsessing about the writing. But the writing business is the accurate expression of what's going on. So this is giving me a chance to market what I think I do pretty well, which is some sort of combined chess with some kind of writing exercise. I mean, I don't know.
So,
But yeah, it's pretty different from what most people would talk about with Adam's touring.
well, I mean, I noticed that you're a good writer just reading your chess life articles, your chess online articles. I mean, obviously, I read your Game of the Month column, but that was many years ago, so it's not as fresh in the mind. But it definitely strikes me, and I was wondering when I read it. So, as sometimes lawyer, do you do a lot of like legal briefs? Do you do a lot of writing for your other job?
Yes. When I have cases, which is not all the time, but last year I did have a significant case which involved a lot of writing. Well, my client, he was an English teacher, so he thought he could do the writing. I told him he couldn't do this writing, so he didn't like that too much. But yeah, there's a lot of writing. Sometimes there isn't, but there is always, in law. One of the good things about law is the battle of ideas is one of the good things. You know, there are many not so nice things about a law practice. So if there's an opportunity where it involves thoroughly analyzing something, then one could say I don't like to go with the whole, if you can do chess, you can do anything routine. That chess will teach you anything. I try to stay away from saying stuff like that. But anyway, yes, there sometimes is that kind of thing.
Well,
now, by the way, oh no, go ahead, Ben.
Okay, well, this is kind of a different tangent, but I mean, I worked for you and Sophia when I was pretty young in my early 20s, and you were a practicing lawyer then, and Sophia's stock advice to me then was, don't go to law school, go to business school. So, I'm somewhat based on I think your experiences. So I'm just curious, like if you've updated that, if you have other stock advice, because I'm sure you come across, smart young chess players who aren't sure what to do with their lives. So do you dispense any professional advice? And if so, what do you say?
Right. Well, I think the issue there is I don't know that they would come to me for advice.
Right. But nonetheless.
But if they did, if they did, I think I'd be saying the same thing that Sophia said to you. For reasons that are really kind of obscure or whatever. I mean, first of all, everything is very, very competitive. But law is a tough business. It works out great for some people. It's a fascinating thing. But, after I stopped working full-time at the law firm that I worked at after I graduated law school, I was there for a number of years. Then I started teaching chess more, I wanted to get back to you mentioned my various columns. In the Game of the Month column, which of course had a wide readership, so people would come up to me, usually, hopefully favorably. I thought it was a pretty good column, but it was pretty much. Okay, I can analyze this game. There's I find a fantastic game somewhere and analyze it and stuff like that. I think more now what I'm trying to do, to the extent whatever writing I'm doing, also at American Chess Magazine, is I'm trying to describe what the tournament really is like, or the experience of the tournament within whatever the article is, and also included some annotated games. So I'm definitely veered off in that direction. Now, what really happened, when I stopped writing Game of the Month was I really kind of felt like I wasn't really competing well with all the other really strong players and very good analysts who were out there, who were, using superior computer technology or willing to dive deeper into it. And I wasn't really producing a great product at that point in time. And, I just stopped for a while.
And this was 2006 that you stopped, right?
Yes.
And so that was your decision?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, most things in life, when something, comes about, some change comes about, there's a certain mutuality to the decision making in some sense.
Yeah, there's some writing on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no one was really pushing me around or anything. But I was, well, it became tougher for me to do it. And I don't know what really happened in recent years that made me decide, that I should delve back into it, because it is very hard. I did write a couple of books in the late '90s. They didn't receive wide sales or readership. One was on the Sveshnikov, play the Sveshnikov, and then I wrote a book, The Great Evans Gambit Debate. It was kind of a funny little book, but it was too thin. So I was all original analysis, but it was too thin. I didn't include the already known theory. So that was not a smart move on my part, probably. So after I got Great Evans Gambit Debate published, I ended up in some tournament somewhere, and I was paired against Gregory Kaidanov, and for some reason, I played E4, he played double king pawn, and I decided to wheel out the Evans Gambit, because after all, I was the author of that book. Mm-hmm. Much like, for example, Fedorovich produced three iterations of the Benko Gambit, so nobody should be able to play in a Benko Gambit against him. So I played the Evans Gambit against Kaidanov, and I got completely crushed. He got the two bishops, somehow gave back the pawn, he just mated me. So okay, that was very interesting, and forgot about it for a while. But anyway, so about a few weeks ago, I'm in a tournament somewhere. I mentioned before Chess Sanity. I wrote one of these articles on Chess Life Online. So Wesley Wang was a teenager, very strong, 2300. He actually played the Evans Gambit against me. I'm thinking, okay, he has no idea that I ever wrote a book on the Evans Gambit, and because it was written before he was born. But I actually did out-theory him, got the better position as black, and then what happened is a typical thing for me in recent years, where I get these pretty good positions against anybody, really. Could be a very strong GM or a strong master or someone, and just wasn't able to win the end game. He actually played very well on defense. So there's a lot of, that's actually a very important feature in recent chess, is that these good players don't fall apart. If they get a bad position, they're fighting hard and with a lot of understanding as to how to not lose that game. And I've had many, many games against young players, well, maybe 20-somethings or maybe teenagers like 17 or 18-year-olds, although Wesley's younger than that, but who just don't fall apart, and they end up drawing a lot of these games against me. So, for example, in the World Open this year, I had that happen a lot. I actually had that happen a lot in the World Open the year before, where, being very experienced, I have a lot of, somewhat cheap tricks in the opening, or can misdirect or get into some position. Most of the time, get something pretty okay, and sometimes emerge with the advantage, and then just face this really, really stiff resistance, which was not the case, if you go back a number of years. So that's a big difference in chess now that I think a lot of people don't really recognize. But I've just had so many games like that.
Do you think the kids are being taught resilience, or why are they better at it than previous generations?
I think it might. I'm not sure. I mean, I want to somehow relate this to them being able to play chess a lot on the internet, and just being through thousands of games where they're just rifling off and just somehow are, I don't know. Somehow they have this this will to, by the way, it is one of the great things in chess, is to have a bad position and to not lose it. It really is one of the, you feel really good about
for
that
sure.
kind of thing. And in fact, it's almost the mission of a chess player to make the winning player's life as miserable as possible, that should be a goal, because that sort of equals the same thing. You're just putting up max resistance, and then you see the opponent just being like, what is going on here? I can't convert this whole thing. Now, whenever I think like that, I always remember this game I had against Schulman in Las Vegas many years ago. I crushed him in the opening, and ends up, okay, I should have maybe been able to put him away, but I emerged into a 2-pawn up double rook endgame. But it's completely winning. Only I really couldn't figure out how to make progress. And as I failed to make progress, I could feel Schulman's energy, rising back up. And, because he knows he should be losing in that position. Of course, he, better than anyone, would know how losing that position is. But, and then as this dragged on, more strong, players, we could say, proverbial strong, Russian players would come over and be very amused at how bad my endgame technique was. And this just dragged on forever. It took 6 hours. I finally did win. And I had a good situation in the tournament too, but then I just got wiped out in the next round by somebody. I can't remember. But it was just sick. But the point is, if I was on the other end of that thing, that is one of the things we have to do is take the bad position and really work on it, because you learn so much. You learn so much. You have to reject so many continuations. This thing leads to a losing endgame. Okay, what about this? That leads to a different kind of losing endgame. And then what about something else? So that kind of exercise is really, really a big deal.
Yeah, I'm gonna read you a couple tweets I came across today. Do you happen to know who Ali Mortazavi is, Mike?
Well, I certainly know of him. Absolutely.
Okay, so I don't know that much about him, to be honest. He's from Great Britain. I looked up his FIDE rating. He's about 2350.
Yeah,
I think he might have the IM title, and he became a biotech CEO of some sort. So he's been out of chess for a long time. So I think he's buddies with Lawrence Trent. So Lawrence Trent has been ribbing him a little bit. And Ali is playing in Isle of Man. So he hasn't played a classical tournament for, however many years, and all of a sudden he's swimming with sharks. So he had some funny tweets that I could really relate to. So one of them is 3 stages in the chess opening, middle game, and end game. My openings are hopelessly out of date. I'm grossly overestimating my middle game positions when checked with the computer after the game, and my end game technique is just non-existent. Apart from that, I'm in good shape. And he also says, well, let me tell you, chess is the hardest job in the world. Chess players are the toughest, most resilient, and motivated people in the world, and they start young. Some of these kids are like elite soldiers at the age of 10. Bio, meaning biotech, is not in the same league, and bio is very tough. I never realized until this week. I thought this was the norm because I'd not played from such a young age. It's not. Nothing compares to the pain of this. I'm going back to biotech, much more forgiving. And on and on. But I just thought it was very funny, because I'm someone who, I'm not as good as him to begin with, but I have sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of competing, and I'm trying to scrap together a repertoire and stuff. And it's just so hard. Everyone's so good.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I certainly knew who Ali was a while ago, and I didn't really know what was up with him. But
Kaidanov's playing in Isle of Man too, by the way.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, absolutely. I noticed a bunch of the Americans who are there. Of course, anyone who's following Isle of Man, you're following comments probably about Jim Tarjan. Yeah. Because of the celebrated win that Tarjan had against Kramnik last year. I remember last year Isle of Man. First of all, Isle of Man is a fun tournament, because, well, it's kind of sponsored, I think, by Chess.com, and also has a relationship to Poker Stars. It's just a fun tournament, but what happened last year? Oh yeah, Magnus played the Carlsen and Karawan were both in the tournament last year, because of their schedules, and they both thought it was, fun. And it's rare actually for them to be in open tournaments like that. But anyway, Magnus played the Owens defense against I can't remember the guy's last name. Sorry with the E, but obviously a grandmaster. So it's one of these, knight f3, b6 deals. And well, there's something to be said about that, which is that if you're going to play the Owens defense, it's actually somehow a lot better for some reason if white plays knight f3 on move 1, then white could play e4 on move 2. But it's better to do that than if white plays e4 on move 1 and then you play b6. But anyway, when this happened, I was watching it.
Why is that?
Well,
just to educate us. Right.
I think, on e4, b6, d4, bishop b7, bishop d3, the things with the distraction things with f5 are really not working.
Right. Okay.
And so black will probably play e6 there, and now white can. I'm not exactly sure white can play queen e2 or knight c3 or there's some more aggressive moves. But the problem I think with knight f3. Now I might not even be remembering this correctly, but the point is that Magnus played the Owens in sort of a more advantageous way because on knight f3 and then b6 and then e4. Bishop b7, we're hitting the e-pawn, and we just keep hitting the e-pawn because white has to play knight c3. If he wants to get his d-pawn to d4, he's got to play knight c3. So then the problem is, black will play e6, and then when white plays d4, black plays bishop b4. So he's hitting the e-pawn, right. And then white plays bishop d3, and then he plays knight f6, and he's hitting the e-pawn again. And then white plays queen e2, and then, this I did not know, the strength of d5 in this position. I used to fool around with c5 in that position to get a semi-fake Sicilian or something, but Magnus just played d5, which is really pretty strong because it kind of black is just taking over the light squares because of e5 you can just sink the knight on e4, and on pawn takes, which happens, is Eljanov. Pavel Eljanov was white, and then Magnus played.
Oh wow, super strong.
Yeah, and then Magnus played knight xd5. I don't know if anyone's following the position now, but. The point is, okay, Magnus played the Owens defense, but he found a way to play the Owens defense where it's a better Owens defense. But I remember at the time, because I was watching it, and I just posted on Facebook, okay, I really don't like that Magnus is playing the Owens defense, but why don't I like it? Because I had students at the time who played the Owens defense, and I was trying to tell them, don't play this thing.
Right.
It's not good. And yet Magnus played it. Of course, the way Magnus played it was good, but the whole point is that he lost, and now they're back to, you see, Magnus played it, and in fact, he crushed this guy.
Yeah, he also played like one knight a3 on some chess.com game, although not quite as serious an environment, but still.
Yeah, but doing this against and by the way, Eljanov really got crushed. So
wow, that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, it is inspiring, though.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've followed a lot of international games lately and sometimes make comments, little posts or something. I sometimes post, diagrams on Facebook just for fun. Usually those are my own games. I'm like, okay, what should somebody do in this position? They're tougher, way tougher positions than the, mate in 3 type stuff or something. And usually when I post that, I usually don't even know what the answer is.
And if anyone listening wants to follow you and promises not to stalk you, are they allowed to, or is this strictly people sort of thing? I mean, I know that
I don't have the I don't know all the settings about making people followers.
Right? Yeah.
Thing and stuff like that.
Second week in a row, I've had this conversation. I mean, with Facebook, I just assume that if you post something, it's being like beamed from the heavens, but I don't really know either.
Well, actually, I wonder about Facebook now sometimes that whether people are even seeing my posts or whatever. But there is a comment I want to make about this that in terms of analysis that, what about just always looking at the computer evaluation for all the positions? And I don't like to look at the computer evaluation so much because I'm curious what the evaluation is. And if you look at every time you see a move and you just enter it, even on your cell phone on Stockfish or something, and then Stockfish blurts out that it's plus 1.7 for white, or like white's just winning or something, I'm not sure how much that helps you unless you're truly doing it as a research function after the fact, after you've already thought, okay, so what is this position? But this also gives me an opportunity to mention that I think these computer things, somebody needs to come up with a new thing. I don't mind giving this one away because I could never do this. But those computer things, and also when you watch a tournament and you see the bar on the left move so that you now know that the computer thinks that black is up a certain amount or something like that. And the players are just obviously oblivious to that, but all the spectators can see that and make comments based on it. But there should be another number, and that number should be the conversion difficulty. I mean, it's 5, but it could be impossible to figure out how it is that guy's winning, and the computer will still say, it's +5, it's made in 13, it just is. And, well, that's very difficult for a human to know, but most importantly, how difficult it is to get from here to there, because there could be grandmasters who won't see that in a tournament game and will suddenly not be +5 at all in the next move. So I think there's someone needs to go out there, and I think designing, the numbers would be simple enough, but to actually implement it would be very, very difficult. But someone should start coming up with the difficulty factor.
Yeah, I got an email from a poker player and chess enthusiast, John Jernigan, about that exact topic, because Karsten Hansen, when I had him on, said something tangentially related. And in poker, it's called realizing your equity,
Right.
when you're a favorite in the hand, but maybe I don't want to go too deep into the weeds in poker, but there are situations, if you have a small pocket pair and hold them, you might be a favorite, but you never know when you're ahead. That's the most simple example you can give. So it's very difficult to play the hand, and you might make mistakes, even though the computer says you're a favorite. Like, you have to put a bunch of money in and find out if you win the hand. So it's not practical. And it's the same thing in chess, where you might have some small edge, but if you have to play a bunch of perfect moves, that's a lot less of an edge than small, but maybe even smaller but reliable edge, where you don't have to find the best move every single move.
Yeah, the theoretical debates, I guess, are similar. Now, by the way, in poker, I used to read this sort of this nonsense stuff from David Sklansky, where he would mention these things, but he would never do the deep analysis that modern poker players and modern poker writers have to do to make a really good poker book or poker analysis or whatever it is that they're doing. So those, what I worry about with those equities is that if those equities are not realized, it's like they were never there. So
Right.
that really, I don't.
You're talking chess there, right?
I'm talking both.
Okay.
But in chess, we theorize that the equity is there. If we're winning, we really want to recognize it somehow. We want to force ourselves to recognize it. But by the way, I'm glad you mentioned Karsten, because I was thinking, I have a student who was, and Karsten just mentioned today that one of his books is back on top on Amazon, so congratulations on that. But one of my students has his book on the dragon, and we were really, really confused about some line that happened where white plays castles long on move 9 in the Yugoslav, and then black makes that sacrifice, pawn sacrifice with d5, and we got into some real mess on when white can, win the exchange with his dark squared bishop, and when it's too dangerous because it gives up too many dark squares. And we found the answer in Karsten's book later when we went to the kid's house and looked at it, because the kid, luckily or by design, has all these books that I don't have. So that was really good. I really thought that was a good thing. And I can't believe how he managed to make so many books.
Oh my God! Yeah, he's a machine. He's running marathons. He's writing books. He's working full time. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. 2 more topics if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Do you have favorite chess books?
Well, on this topic, I really go back a long way in terms of remembering what got me to be good in the first place. So one of my favorite books is The Art of Attack in Chess, which of course is a very old book. And I thought the analysis by, Vladimir Vuksevich was really, really great in that book. Of course, who knows, people have come up with all kinds of things since then. But it was really, really good. And in fact, when I show people the classic bishop sacrifice, which is what was called in that book, although sometimes people call it the Greek gift or something.
Right.
Bishop takes h7 check, followed by knight g5 check. The Art of Attack in Chess has the most scientific analysis of what kinds of positions that will work in. And in fact, I sometimes show these positions, and then this classic bishop sacrifice often happens in a French defense type position where, the knight on there's no knight on f6, so and white has a pawn on e5 and the bishop's on d3, and it takes on h7. So one of the things in Art of Attacking Chess was, well, if black's knight is on e7, then when white gets this queen on h5, knight g5 formation, if the knight's there on e7, you don't take the f-pawn. You just play queen h7 check, and then the king moves over, queen h8 check. The knight has to go to g8, and knight h7, king e7, bishop g5. Now, I know nobody knows what I'm talking about here, but if the knight's on e7, you don't take the f-pawn. But if there's no knight on e7, you take the f-pawn first, queen h5, x f7 check, king h8, then come back to h5, then go into h7, h8, and then play queen takes g7 mate. So the point is, this guy had it all worked out. If there's a knight there, you do this. If the knight's not there, you do that other thing. Then he had all these factors that went into whether to make the bishop sacrifice. So I just found all that to be amazing. And I read that when I was a kid. So that was really what got me into my original sort of attacking style a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm guessing I read that book as a kid too, and I'm thinking it's like good up to 1600. What do you think? It's hard to...
I think you can go a little higher than that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I also pounded through MCO 10.
Yeah, that famously, yeah.
Yeah. So that was just a thing that somehow...
So MCO is modern chess openings before, for you youngins, before there were computers, the way that if you had a question about opening theory, they published these encyclopedias, basically.
Yeah. It was, of course, the later products were better, but MCO 10 was there when I was a kid, and it was quite good. It had just like the ECO, it has no language in it really at all, and just has moves. I think for me, mostly it was the Roy Lopez that I was kind of like pounding through. It was kind of like, that was a very clockwork sort of white attacks the pawn, black defends it, white attacks it again. I love this business in the Steinish defense in the Roy Lopez where every move is an attack or a defense of either e4 or e5. And then, yeah, that reminds me of some of the stories that I tell these kids sometimes. I don't even know if some of these... I've told these stories so often, I don't know if they're true anymore, really.
Oh, that's the least important thing.
But, that Tarrasch wrote something. He wrote a book. Of course, Tarrasch wrote a book called The Game of Chess. But Tarrasch... There's a thing called the Tarrasch Trap where he beat this guy, Mises or someone like that, in the Steinish defense of Roy Lopez, where Tarrasch would go around saying, well, black can never play e5 x d4 because it gives up the little center, so you can't do it. You got to hold that pawn forever in the Roy Lopez and just keep it there. But it turns out that black can't do that in this variation, because if he does that, white gets to exchange a million pieces, then take the e-pawn, and then come back and skewer black eventually on the e-file. And that's, I think it's known as the Tarrasch Trap. But I don't really know that Tarrasch deliberately wrote something to get Mises to follow this line and then sprung the trap on him. But my other favorite story with kids is I tell them that Christopher Columbus was a chess player, and he was from Italy, and he learned to play bishop c4 from guys like Greco. But when he got to Spain, Roy Lopez told him, you can't put the bishop on c4, it has to go to b5. And okay, so he started doing that. He started asking, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand for the money for the ships, and they weren't interested. And so Christopher Columbus left, and then Roy Lopez, got on a horse and went to find him and said, okay, the King Ferdinand is challenging you now. If you beat him in a game of chess, you'll get the money for the ships. So I deem that Christopher Columbus is the link between the Italian and the Spanish openings somehow.
Huh. And so is that true about Christopher Columbus?
No, I don't know if any of that is true.
Oh, okay.
But I just like to teach a little fake history sometimes.
Yeah, okay. At least get them thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, last topic, Mike. When we were talking before we recorded, you mentioned you did have some stories about, or you said you don't have a lot of stories, but you did play some strong players over the years. So who are the most noteworthy or memorable players you played?
Well, I mean, easily the most memorable player that I've ever played is Boris Spassky. I played him in the 1987 New York Open. I'm pretty sure I played him in the third round of that tournament. I was white. He played. It was a Roy Lopez actually, and he played some kind of Berlin defense, but not the usual thing. He played Bishop E7 at a moment in time when Black usually plays Knight D6 in that Berlin defense thing. After White has played D4, so White plays D4 in that position. Black usually plays Knight D6. He played Bishop E7. Now I knew what Bishop E7 was, from my MCO10 days, and I remember seeing it, somewhere. So I knew to play Queen E2 in that position, and then he did some things that I really wasn't familiar with. And it ended up being a draw. And then basically, by the way, I made a Grandmaster norm in that tournament in the 87 New York Open. The New York Open is where I played a lot of great players. Eventually, in the series of tournaments, I played Smyslov, Portish, some other very famous European Grandmasters. But so in this game, oh yeah. So after the game, Dmitry Gurevich, runs up to me and says, people will really respect you now. You drew with Boris Spassky. That was really, special. Okay. And then I ended up playing a bunch of other good players in that tournament. But a couple of days later, Spassky shows up, and he's got his tennis uniform on. Clearly, he's ready to play tennis. And he was paired against Fedorovich, as it happens. And, okay, so their game was a draw also. And then Spassky ran off to play tennis. And then I said to Gurevich, okay, so, how much respect did I really earn?
Right, yeah.
I was just being silly, but,
you had to work for your draw.
Yeah, it was just funny. But
that is funny. I mean, and quite an honor to play him. I mean, I remember those New York Open tournaments that, 13 or whatever, 13-year-old Judith Polgar came to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the best. My best game, my most famous game ever is 1992 against Susan Polgar. It was kind of a king hunt game. Okay, and I think that Soltis put it in one of his lists of best games and stuff like that. It was really a good game, and by the end of the game, Zhuzha, she knew she was losing. She started moving faster and faster. Her king had traveled from E8, went out to G6, crossed the board, ended up on A3, and eventually I managed to find a checkmate. Okay, so of course she was very nice about it and everything. Well, she was trying to move fast to get me in time pressure. She got me in time pressure, but I managed to not get flustered and get the checkmate. But as soon as the game ended, Judith, this was in New York, 1992, Judith comes up and says to Susan that, she had a better defense, whatever. And of course, Judith was completely right about it.
Right, of course.
And at the time I was thinking, well, that doesn't really look so great over there. The king retreats and goes into a little huddle and it's kind of like a boxer putting their arms on top of their head so that they can't be, they're getting pummeled, but you can't land the big blow and stuff like that. That's what the position looked like. But actually, of course, really Black would have been perfectly fine if that had happened. So that was interesting, and then I lost to Judith in that tournament.
Oh, well, at least you got to play her.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so she would have been, you said 92, so she would have been, what, 16 or something?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm not sure. But the three of them, of course, came to New York Open multiple times. Many great players came to New York Open. So that was good that so many players came there.
Cool. All right. Well, Mike, I feel like you've given us adequate stories. You might have a few more, but we'll save them for another time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Ben.
All right. If anyone wants to reach you, is your information available, like on chess.com or Facebook or whatever?
I don't really know if my information is available. I guess they can find me if they really want to. I guess we'll just leave it at that.
Okay. They can track you down. Sounds good.
They can track me down, yeah.
All right.
Not hard. It's not too hard. One time I ran into, by accident, an ex-governor of New York State on the subway, David Patterson.
The blind guy, yeah.
Yeah, I told him, I just started talking to him, and I didn't know who he was, and someone else told me, sort of motioned at me like I'm talking to a famous person or something. But eventually I started talking to him, and then I asked him something. He said who he was and this and that, and then I just said, well, I'm Michael Rohde, and you can go down to the Marshall Chess Club and find me there.
Right.
So it would be the simplest way of tracking me down.
It's a good point. Yeah, wait there. Come Thursday night, basically.
Yeah.
Say hi to you and Jay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, cool. Well, Mike, thanks so much. I know it's a late night, so I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ben.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. That includes Geert Vanderveld for supplying the intro music, Matthew Passy, my esteemed producer, and everyone who's written a good review on Apple Podcasts or other podcast platforms or told a friend about the show. Every little bit helps. But of course, I'm most indebted to those who donate to support the show. Without you guys, the show would not be possible. And I want to give special thanks to my Patreon and PayPal perpetual partners. Here are your names. I'm slowly but surely correcting some mispronunciations, so let's see how I do this time. Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adam Brancourge, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, Ali Morchetti, Andres Crisdois, Brian Mullis, Carl Labons. I am Carlos Perdomo of ChessAtlanta.com, Chad Hilton, Chad Oliver, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zulicki, a.k.a. Chess Explained, Coach Jay's Chess Academy, Dan O'Hanlon, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas, Daniel Naylor, Daniel D. Schaefer, Daniel Vine-E, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith, Donnie Ariel, Frank Tortoris, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Greg Shahadi, Harish Srinivasan, GM Jakob Agard, James Bonastia, Jason Woolham, Jennifer Valens of OffTheRook.com, Jeffrey Martello, John Fernandez, John Hartman, John Jernigan, Jen Shahadi, Jens Green, Jerry Wells, John Thompson, Johnny McMenamin, Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, Kostya Kovutsky, Krishna Gopala Krishnan, Laura Belyavsky, Leo Delgado, Lorraine Dore, Matthew Passy, Macaulay Peterson of the Full English Breakfast, Matthew Tedesco, Nate Salon, Nathan Webster, Pascal Charbonneau, Paul Swaney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Rob Lazorchek, Robert Steiner, Ryan Sohn, Steiner Lima, Stuart Katz, WGM Tatyev Abrahamian, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Tim Brennan, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Todd Bryant, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Victor Vrancouge, Zhao Cheng, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks a lot, everyone. Catch you guys soon.